Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
A magic beyond anything you could ever imagine.
You are now listening to the Hunt Palmer Show. Brought to you by Sagrera Farms on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Locking down the middle of the day.
You really think that's the best idea?
Live from the Raising Cane studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
He's quite a piece of work.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Raising Cane studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday, working towards the weekend. Means we're brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. Jordan Kitchens and Braxton
Rizzuto.
It was going to get there. And then it just didn't show up. And you had to help me out. But that's why you're there, really.
We're working for the weekend. That's all that matters.
It's true. My apologies, Braxton. I knew your name. I just couldn't come up with it in the moment. But he is there on the ones and twos, and we're off and running here on this Thursday. We'll talk to Luke Johnson about the Saints coming up here in 15 minutes. Joe Healy to set the scene for the Super Regionals coming up in 30 minutes. Jaden Bryan decommitted from LSU. What does that mean? Got some sound from Saints OTAs as well. We'll get to that. Landon Hood is the newest target, I believe, for LSU from a pitching perspective. I'll give you my thoughts on him coming up at 2:15. We have got plenty to do, so lock us in. Let's crank it up with our opening drive.
Welcome to the big league.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive. Presented by Fabry Chevrolet GMC in St. Francisville.
So I just mentioned all that. LSU baseball is chasing players. The Saints are in OTAs. One of the most decorated players in the history of the organization just popped in on OTAs. We've got recruiting news, Super Regionals this weekend. There's a lot going on. And I'm starting with basketball. Not the NBA Finals. Not Knicks Spurs. LSU basketball? Why? Well, I was a little surprised this morning when I woke up. I should have caught this yesterday evening, but I got the kids, and then we got in bed, and just time to go to sleep and get up early and do it all over again. And I saw this morning, and I went, well, something I said earlier this week was dead wrong, and that's pretty cool. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, reports are surfacing, and a lot of them out of the Pacific Northwest. LSU is going to go play Gonzaga in November 14th to be exact. That is the same day LSU plays Texas in football. My sincere hope is those two games don't immediately overlap. They very well might, but maybe they decide to put LSU and Texas in the afternoon here in Tiger Stadium. Maybe it's a primetime tip-off in Seattle, Spokane, which would put it at 9 o'clock at night here. Maybe they play at noon out west, and it's 2 o'clock here, and LSU and Texas play at 7. I don't know, but LSU and Gonzaga are going to play in basketball, and I think that's really cool. You look back at Gonzaga over the years. They were 31-4 last year. 26-9 the year before that. 27-8, 31-6, 28-4, 31-1, 31-2, 33-4, 32-5. Like, this is the winningest program in college basketball over the last 15 years. And they do that in some part because they destroy the WCC every year. I mean, 16-2, 14-4, 14-2, 14-2, 13-1, 15-0, 15-1, 16-0, 17-1, 17-1. You get the picture. But Mark Few knows that. So Mark Few goes out every single November and December, and he plays a monster non-conference schedule. They play Duke. They play Kentucky. They play Texas. They played Alabama the last couple of years. They played Auburn. They travel. They welcome teams in. And I said earlier this week, you got LSU playing in this Palm Springs tournament, and you'll see potentially St. Louis there, who's got a really good coach and a good program, and you might see Southern Cal there, who's recruited pretty well, and maybe you see Stanford or Colorado, another Power 5 team. But LSU's not really in a spot where they can go out and schedule the big boys. Well, I'm wrong. They can. And that's a really, really cool thing. You realize in the last 2 weeks, Will Wade has scheduled games with Houston and Gonzaga. I just ripped through Gonzaga's records. You want to hear Houston? 30-7, 35-5, 32-5, 33-4, 32-6. That's 6 straight years They have had 28-plus wins for Kelvin Sampson in Houston. And LSU will go to the Toyota Center and play them there. They will go up to Spokane and play Gonzaga. They're not playing in the Kennel. The on-campus arena at Gonzaga seats about 6,000 people. Spokane Arena, which is downtown in Spokane, I'm not an expert on Spokane geography, but I read this, downtown, it seats, depending on the venue and the event, between 10 and 15,000. I don't know what that means for basketball, but you're going to have more people in there. This just in, Gonzaga doesn't have football. So the folks in Spokane going to show up for LSU and Gonzaga. And I think it's impressive that Will Wade is able to get these games scheduled. He and Kelvin Sampson have a relationship. They go way back. When Will Wade was here previously, LSU went to Houston and played the Cougars on campus there in the newly renovated Fertitta Center. They're playing him in the Toyota Center this time around, and I told y'all that was because Will Wade likes to play in arenas to get ready for the NCAA tournament. And this is the same type deal in Spokane as well, even though this one's not as big. What this one really is just a high-profile non-conference game. And LSU just hasn't played those. Like, I applaud Matt McMahon for getting LSU to go up to Manhattan, Kansas, and play Kansas State. That ended up being a really good win for LSU. You got a SMU game here and an SMU game there in neutral sites, and that is what it is. You're always going to play in the SEC, ACC Challenge, but other than that, LSU's non-conference schedule was terrible year over year over Matt McMahon. Not going to happen with Will Wade. And what we've said, and what I know to be true, is that Will Wade takes scheduling very, very, very seriously. And what he does, he's got a consultant that will put together numbers for him and spit out who he believes are going to be non-conference teams that win upwards of 27, 25 games. 27's steep ask. Upward of 23, 25 games. And that may be in a smaller league, but he finds them. You remember when he was here, he was scheduling Belmont. He was scheduling Ohio. He was scheduling Stephen F. Austin. There was a year he thought that Southeastern would be really good. And he schedules teams that win a lot of games in their leagues. And that takes some finessing in the transfer portal era when you're looking at teams that are losing a lot of players or there's a coaching change. And it's really hard to determine what mid-major teams are going to be really good. It's not really hard to determine whether or not Gonzaga is going to be really good. They're going to be really good. And this is just really, really cool that he's able to do this. LSU is going to be, in my opinion, which is based on very little this time of year. I don't know what Houston's got. I don't know what Gonzaga's got. I'm not going to go look it up right now. That's not really of consequence at this point. But I would suggest they'll be sizable underdogs in both of those games. They're traveling to both, even though neither are on campus. And those two teams win 30 games every year. So it's going to be a really tall challenge, but Will Wade is accepting that challenge. This tells me a couple things. I think he thinks they're going to have a lot of these guys eligible. Now, Will Wade's a very, very confident guy. He was under fire the entire time he was here last time, and it never seemed to make him flinch until it was finally over. So maybe he's just got a little bit of bravado in scheduling these games. But it feels like he thinks they've got a real chance to get these guys eligible and that they can be competitive in these games. And the coaches around the country are answering the phone calls and taking the games. And I think that's awesome. Now, what I can't answer, and I'm going to check with LSU on this, I don't know what these games count as on LSU's resume. Do you have to play Houston in their arena, in the Fertitta Center, for that to be a road game, or is this a neutral site in Houston in the Toyota Center? Now, I would suggest that LSU will have a nice presence in Toyota Center for that game. There's a ton of alums in Houston. All you need for a really nice basketball presence is 5,000 people. I think LSU will get a good amount in the Fertitta Center for that game. Now, LSU will get nobody in Spokane. They may fly some people, some boosters up there with the team that don't want to go to LSU Texas in Tiger Stadium, but that's going to be a flat-out road game in a big environment. I don't know if it counts as a road game or a neutral site. You'd certainly like it to count as a road game. You get more net points for road games. But that's a story for a different day. What this tells me is that LSU basketball is back to being interesting. I did not say great. I did not say elite. I don't even know if they're going to make the tournament. I don't even know who's going to be on the team. But I'm telling you that LSU is interesting from a basketball perspective. Will Wade is looking outside the box at roster composition. You knew he would. Whether you think these guys should or should not be eligible. There are people on both sides of that. That's not really the point either. What we know is that he's willing to go try. And we also know now that he's willing and now able to get big-name non-conference teams on the schedule. It's not Kansas. It's not Duke. It's not UConn. But Houston and Gonzaga win as many games as those teams in lesser leagues in Gonzaga's case. Houston's now moved into the Big 12. That's a solid basketball league. But you're looking at two of the best and winningest programs in the sport, and Will Wade got them on the phone and got LSU into the game with them. I think that's awesome. I hinted at this in my Twitter earlier today. Like, I think we're going to probably have to bring the podcast back because I think people care about this. I think people are interested in this. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking basketball between 1 and 3 in the middle of football season. I'm not. I'm going to spend some time on it. Absolutely. When they play a game, we'll talk about it. When they've got Gonzaga coming up, when they've got Houston coming up, we will certainly spend a little bit of time on that, but not as much as we certainly will on football. But I can give you a little bit more when it comes to the podcast side. So I think we're going to fire that back up come November. This was just kind of fuel on that fire again. I don't know what LSU is going to have from a roster perspective. I don't know who's going to be eligible and who is not going to be eligible. But the fact of the matter is that Will Wade is going after players to put the best team he can on the floor, and he's getting real non-conference games. So to have Houston, to have Gonzaga, to have a tournament that potentially has St. Louis, and then maybe Colorado or Stanford, and then you've got the ACC game that you'll get that the league will assign you. This is cool. I'm in on this. I think this is a great thing for LSU basketball, and I was really excited when I read this morning. The story's up at LouisianaSports.net. You can go check that out. But main story, LSU and Gonzaga will play on the Saturday that LSU and Texas play in November on the 14th. That's football. That's basketball. I know where your attention will lie, but hopefully they stagger those games so that we can get eyes on both of them over the course of that fun Saturday here in Baton Rouge. All right, that's our opening drive. We're brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. Let's talk a little Saints. Luke Johnson next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Boudreaux's Electrical Services. Boudreaux's Electrical Services. You can find them online at boudreauxelectrical.com. Neil and Melissa have been running the show at Boudreaux's for 40 years. It's the local option for a Generac home standby generator. You can buy a Generac home standby generator from the big box stores. I promise you can do it. But do they install it? If they do you ever hear from them again? What if there's a mechanical issue? Do you know who to call? That's not what you want to be dealing with. Boudreaux's Electrical is local from start to finish. You call them at 985-397-1562 or 225-300-9389. Give them a call. They come out, look at your situation. They give you a quote on the generator. Say, yes, let's get it going. They send a local team out to install it. They're monitoring it 24/7 after the installation. If there's a mechanical issue, local team comes out to handle it so that when your power goes out, and we know that happens in South Louisiana, that Generac home standby generator is ready to go. It's Boudreaux's Electrical Services. You can contact them at 985-397-1562, or I give you the easy way every single day. That's boudreauxelectrical.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Thursday show is always brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. Let's talk some Saints. To do that, we bring in Luke Johnson, out last week gallivanting around Italy. I'm sure he's full of pizza, pasta, and a Peroni or two. Luke, how are you?
Buongiorno, Huck.
Uh-huh.
I said Huck. That's my dog's name. Look, this is how like jacked up I am after traveling across the Atlantic Ocean with a 3-month-old.
Oh, y'all brought the baby?
We had to. Yeah, she can't eat without another food source around.
Wow.
So yeah, that was fun. That was fun. Look, she did great though. I can highly recommend having kids who sleep really well.
Mm-hmm. I recommend that as well. We managed to pull that off one way or another for two of them. So welcome back. Let's talk some football. Alvin Kamara popped in. What'd you make of it?
Yeah, despite his efforts to say anything to the contrary, it feels like a shot across the bow to me. This is my 9th year covering the Saints coming up. it's my second time seeing Alvin at a voluntary activity for the team. So yeah, it's absolutely a message being sent, saying like, hey, if you're going to do something, do it, because I'm here, and I'm going to be a part of this until you say otherwise. So he had some fun little comments about being like, I just really want to go to New Orleans, and I made the decision like late Tuesday night to catch the last flight out of Miami and in New Orleans and get in at 1 a.m. and go to practice. Like, yeah, okay, man. There's a level of calculations going on here that you don't want to get into. That's fine. You don't need to spill all the tea, but yeah, it feels to me like he's saying, hey, I'm here. The ball's in your court. Do something.
I'm intrigued by the non-committal nature of the Saints' answers, whether it's Mickey Loomis or Kellen Moore on the issues. Like, what do you draw from that?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, because like Mickey's been talking about like asset management, which like I don't really get. At least definitely not from a 2026 perspective. I mean, they already made the decision to go out and sign Travis Etienne. Like, they've already got a bunch of money poured into the running back room, and that's not going to change no matter what happens from here on out for 2026. Maybe he's talking about the future of the team, 2027, and being more cap healthy. Then they got a ton of space next year. They can take on the $16 million in dead money or whatever it's going to be, because all that other dead money they've had to deal with for the last couple of years can be off the books.
Yeah.
So, it's been really hard to kind of make sense of it all without getting like the true motivations behind what they're saying. I mean, at the end of the day, maybe it all boils down to they just don't think Alvin's the player he once was, which, is definitely true to a degree. Which degree the Saints believe it is kind of the key point here, right? They obviously went out and got a new starting running back this offseason. They invested a draft pick in Devin Neal last year and Kendre Miller a few years before that. They wanted to get more explosive and better in that room. But I still think that, with a better offense around him, better offensive line, I still think Alvin has probably more in the tank than he showed last year. He's just 2 years removed from 1,600 scrimmage yards and career high in rushing and a handful of touchdowns. I think there's still probably more in the tank there. It's just a matter of how much and how much they believe in it.
We are 6-7 weeks out from training camp. Do you think he's there when they break for camp?
Yeah, my inkling all along has been that he will be there.
Okay.
But I just got done talking to my colleague, and he doesn't think he'll be there. Yeah, I do think that there's really an element of unknown to this, and the longer the Saints they drag this out, where they say like, we're still evaluating his spot on the roster, makes it feel less likely, right? It'd be very easy for them to say he's a part of the team, but I still just doing a cost benefit analysis of this thing. It just feels like, to me, really unlikely that they're just gonna wave off one of the better running backs in franchise history, a guy who holds all these franchise rushing records, over like a couple $1 million. I don't see what they really get out of that outside of a really negative PR hit and a worse football team.
Sounds like Tyler Shuck had a pretty good day out there at OTAs yesterday. Made some throws. I realize nobody's wearing full pads. The linemen aren't doing a whole heck of a lot, but what'd you draw from that?
Yeah, giant grain of salt, right?
Yep.
Like a huge block of salt. But yeah, look, we were all out there for Tyler Shuck experience last year in OTAs, and there was some impressive moments from last year's OTAs, but you can see growth, right? You can see a guy who's really comfortable in the offense, who's comfortable with his teammates, who is willing to be a little bit more aggressive and not play the I'm going to go out here and not make mistakes and do the right thing and check the ball down 5 times in 10 reps for 7-on-7. So I think we saw him yesterday just take a couple really confident steps up and just kind of rip balls downfield. I mean, there was, of his 6 completions, 4 of them were intermediate, 15 to 20 yards downfield. And I mean, the talent has never been in question for him. It's just, it's like, can he continue to put everything together? Can he take a step forward? And I think that's just a small sign, but it's a sign that he's moving in the right direction.
He's got a lot of new wide receivers running around out there. Anything catch your eye from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jalen Polk looks really impressive, right? Just from a again, this is like they're running out there in t-shirts and shorts, right? And it's not the same level of competition they're even going to face in training camp, in joint practices, real games, et cetera. But I think just from like a physical standpoint, I think Jalen Pope looks really impressive. Obviously, like it did not go well for him in New England. They basically gave him away for like a bag of peanuts.
Yep.
But I think for somebody who is trying to be the third or fourth wide receiver on this team, like he is light years ahead of what they've had in the last several. Basically, my entire time covering this team, right? Maybe with the exception of like the 2021 season when they had Mike Thomas, Jarvis Landry, Chris Olave all on the same team. You felt pretty good about all three of those guys, even if injuries kind of ruined that. I think that just from a pure numbers and talent standpoint, they're so much better off than they were. Bryce Lance, he's somebody. Look, he's like exactly who we thought he was going to be at this stage, right? He's wiry. He's really thin. We've seen him kind of struggle through contact a couple times, but like, man, when he goes, like he really goes. And he had just a beautiful double move, deep ball touchdown the other day in 7-on-7. And again, grain of salt, but like this is what you want to see out of a player like him. You want to see him using his speed to get vertical and make big plays. That's going to be what they're going to ask him to do. They're not going to ask him to go run a bunch of digs and try to catch a fastball in the middle of the field when Fred Warner's waiting to take your head off. Like they want him to go use his speed, stretch the field, and open things up for everybody else. And it might be a very, very small role for him in his rookie season. Like asking for 20 catches might be asking for a lot, but I think they might be really, really important catches. And even when he doesn't have the ball, teams are going to have to be aware of him. So I really like that addition.
You mentioned Olave. What does the signing over in Atlanta with Drake London mean for him in the next couple of months?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it just continues to raise the floor for what he's going to be making. I remember, I think it might have even been on your show last year. I balked at the idea of paying him $30 million a year. I bet the math has changed, and it's going to continue to change. And the longer this plays out, the more it's going to change. And I think that Drake London signing a deal that's going to get him $35 million plus a year with $100 million in guarantees probably means Chris Olave is going to be signing around that number.
Yep.
And I think, look, I feel a lot better about him now than I did at week 8 last year. I think the guarantees are going to be a sticking point here because he's a guy with a history of concussions, and he's not 6'4", 210 like Drake London is. He's smaller, and injuries are going to be part of his NFL story. So the guarantees are probably going to be what they're talking about. But when you talk about APY, like those players are very similar in terms of what they produced, where they were drafted, what they've done in the pros. And yeah, I think 35 is a benchmark for him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he clears it.
We shall certainly see. We'll be reading. Luke Johnson covers the team for The Advocate, NOLA.com, with us on Thursdays. Welcome back. We'll talk next week.
Sounds good, buddy. See ya. Ciao. Ciao, buddy.
Beautiful. Luke Johnson, fresh out of Italy, where he was at our mutual friend David Hellman's wedding across the pond. It was like my entire Reveille friend staff that was over there, and a lot of the NFL beats was over there. Saw Kat Terrell was there, Luke Johnson was there, saw Courtney Cronin was there, who covers the Bears that I run into a lot in my Chicago covers. It seemed like quite a festive event, and Luke and his beautiful bride was there with their newborn, apparently, which I was unaware of. It seems like everybody had a great time. Hellman's off and married. That's all good, and we welcome Luke back to talk a little bit of Saints. Also want to remind you about Highland Insurance Group. They're online at highlandig.com. That's highlandig.com. Hurricane season's here. Make sure your property policy is all lined up. Make sure your buildings are evaluated property. Make sure that you've got a proper business interruption limit. Your deductibles are in line with your risk appetite. If you don't know what your property policy says, now's the time to look. And if you're not sure what you're looking at, well, that's what the experts at the Highland Insurance Group are here to do. They know the property market is tough right now. And if you're looking for a second option as we enter hurricane season, talk to Jonathan Carver and his team. They are experts. They've got multiple markets. They're an independent broker. They can help you with all of that. They're online at highlandig.com. It's the Highland Insurance Group bringing you our shows each and every day. We still got plenty to get to here. Jaden Bryant decommitted from LSU yesterday. South Carolina prospect, 5-star edge rusher, flipped to Miami, says he's shutting things down. Did that about 5 hours after he tweeted, "Go Tigers." I guess that's recruiting these days. I wrote a column about it over at LouisianaSports.net where it's just like, in a bygone era when a 5-star decommitted, like the internet went ablaze. And like yesterday I sent out like, what's our give a darn meter here? And it was like none, like whatever. And that's just kind of where we are with that stage of recruiting. Maybe on signing day, maybe if it's a Louisiana prospect. We'll talk about all that coming up in 15 minutes. But Jaden Bryant did decommit. We'll talk about that at 1:45. We'll get some sound from Kellen Moore at 2 o'clock. LSU baseball is searching for arms and bats. We'll talk about an arm that they're targeting coming up at 2:15. So that's 45 minutes from now. But when we come back, we'll set the table for Super Regional Weekend to come. Joe Healy, SEC Extra on D1 Baseball. He'll be with us next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Fabry Chevrolet GMC, online at fabrychevrolet.com, on Highway 61 in St. Francisville, not far from right here in Baton Rouge. My wife and I, a couple months ago, went up to St. Francisville for a 5-year anniversary weekend, and it's really quick. It's just a quick trip up 110 there on Highway 61, and that's where you'll find Fabry Chevrolet GMC. So if you're in Baton Rouge and you hear St. Francisville and go, well, how far is that? It's pretty quick, right north of town, and you can get there for a great selection of vehicles, great customer service. You'll get wonderful buying experience and great service after the sale. If you're looking for a new SUV for that family road trip, can't recommend the Chevy Tahoe or the Chevy Suburban enough. You can also get behind the wheel of a GMC Yukon, a Denali. They're all right there at Fabry Chevrolet GMC. The Fabry family has been at this 35 years. How do they last 35 years? Well, it's because great customer service and amazing relationships here in this town. Go by and see them, Highway 61 in St. Francisville, or check out that entire inventory online at fabrychevrolet.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Chugging right along here on this Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. Let's switch gears back to baseball. Joe Healy, D1 Baseball's SEC Extra team, good enough to join us all season long on Thursdays, even after the Tigers have been done for a couple of weeks. But an awesome weekend of regional baseball in the rearview mirror and Supers headed this way. So we'll talk to Joe about it. He joins us now on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Joe, how are you?
Doing well, but I think I'm actually more interested in how you were doing last weekend. How much regional baseball did you, in fact, consume without the Tigers being involved?
I talked about this a lot on Monday. I had a blast over the weekend. I watched a ton of it. I never want to do it again in that view where I don't have any like skin in the game at all, but it was great. I had a great time.
Well, that's good. I mean, yeah, sometimes when you take the emotion out of it, sometimes it actually helps you enjoy it a little more.
Again, I never want to do that again, but it was a different perspective. I wasn't like watching a game in front of me and then trying to catch a score over here or dealing with the rain delay or working and trying to write stories. I was just able to watch, which was a refreshing deal, and the baseball was really, really captivating. I'm curious, what surprised you more, Florida and Troy or Texas A&M and USC?
Probably Florida and Troy, just for a couple of reasons. One is that I think we all kind of saw with Texas A&M, like, look, if there's a team that comes into this regional and suddenly gets hot from an offensive standpoint, like Texas A&M's probably not going to have the arms to put up any resistance. And I think we saw that when USC got hot from an offensive perspective. They just Texas A&M just didn't have a counterpunch. And now, was it surprising they only scored one run in the regional final? Yeah, like that was surprising, but I just wasn't too surprised that they eventually got because I think we kind of see that coming. Now, with Florida, they had just been playing so well. They felt like they were a team rounding into form. I'd spent so much time talking about how this was a team that felt like it had found itself a little bit. It had found itself offensively. Brennan Lawson had gotten hot. Caden McDonald had turned into a star. Blake Sear had elevated to the next level and become a superstar, and just thought they were playing at an extremely high level. So to see them get just bullied on their home field twice by Troy was shocking. And Troy's a talented team that, took a long time to get going this season. So I think some of it was bad luck on Florida's part. They ended up with a Troy team that's peaking right now. But still, like, you should not be getting bullied on your home field twice by a Sun Belt team in a regional final.
What do you make of the fact that none of the Omaha 8 from last year have made super regionals?
Yeah, I think parity at the top of the game is pretty good right now. I think for all of the worrying and the hand-wringing about, there's going to be even more separation between the haves and have-nots at the top of the sport. Like, I think shows that the sport is in a pretty healthy place. And I'm not talking necessarily about Troy and Little Rock because those are kind of one-offs. I'm talking more about a team like Oklahoma. that is probably it's almost certainly at the bottom half of the SEC in terms of investment in a lot of ways, and is probably closer to the bottom than it is to the middle, frankly, in investment in a lot of ways in the SEC. And yet they're back in a super regional, took down the number 2 overall seed in Georgia Tech. So the fact that they still have enough to get this done, I think shows, and have a chance to go to Omaha, shows that the top of the sport is pretty healthy, and there's a ton of parity there. And I think that's ultimately pretty good for the sport, that we've not necessarily seen that further breaking off of the top handful of teams, and we're not getting, as much as dynasties can be interesting, I do think sometimes dynasties can be evidence of an ecosystem that's not 100% healthy. And so I think parity is a little bit better for the health of college baseball, and that's where we are.
I admit this question's coming through my 8 national championship glasses here, and my Paul Skeens, Kate Anderson glasses here, and my Dylan. Like, I get where I'm coming from. It's probably condescending, but just bear with me. Like, are Alabama and Oklahoma good this year? I've watched them a lot. Can you help me?
No, I wish I really could. Like, I've been fighting the same battle this year with, are these teams actually any good? And I think at this point, I think we have to just assume yes to some degree. I understand Alabama a little bit more than I understand Oklahoma, if I'm going to be honest, because Alabama has had the same 3 starting pitchers all weekend long, and I think so much of success in the SEC is just like, do you have at least 2 guys, ideally 3, but do you have at least 2 guys in your rotation that you're going to turn the ball over to, and that aren't going to throw up all over the front of their jerseys, metaphorically speaking, in their starts? And they have that, and I think those 2 guys have really steadied the ship for Alabama. But you look at it's amazing to me that the negatives of that team. I mean, they had a game in the regional where they made 6 errors and still won the game. My colleague Mark Etheridge put it wonderfully when he said that Alabama wins ugly beautifully, and that's just kind of the way they do it. Oklahoma, I understand less so though, because their pitching has been inconsistent, their offense has been inconsistent. There's not a ton of star power on that position player side. They've got some talented arms, but those talented arms, just as often as they're really good, they're really poor. And I guess they maybe just put it all together for a single weekend. But, who's to say they can't go in and do it to Kansas this weekend? The Kansas team looked pretty good over the weekend in Lawrence, but who's to say they couldn't do it again?
Who gets to go to Athens on the D1 team this weekend?
That is me. I drew the long straw, if you will, and got to go to Athens. That one's going to be just an absolute heavyweight fight this weekend.
Yeah, tell me about how you see it.
Yeah, I really kind of I like Georgia if this thing ends up going to 3 games, but I get a little bit nervous with Thomas Valinkas being really, really good, and what if he wins? What if he is able to win game 1? Georgia has used Volchko, has maybe used some of its best bullpen arms, and then all Mississippi State has to do is win a second game and get out of there. Like that does make me a little nervous from a Georgia perspective, because I think the longer this thing goes, if it goes to 3, Georgia is just so accustomed to having to win games in a specific way where they have to throw a bunch of bullpen at them. The game gets kind of ugly. They have to score a bunch of runs. I think Georgia's really comfortable with that, and I think that's what game 3 would be in this series between these 2 teams. So if you're Mississippi State, the motivation, obviously, this goes without saying, but the motivation is really to get this thing done in 2, because if it gets to 3, I start to lose a little bit more confidence in State.
And then we'll go to the other All-SEC Super. That is Auburn hosting Ole Miss. I got to tell you, I like Ole Miss making a run here, because I like their 3 starting pitchers that much. How do you see this one going on the Plains?
Yeah, I kind of do too, and especially when you combine it with the fact that it feels a little, and maybe I'm just over-indexing on the one start where we saw Milwaukee just absolutely pound Jake Marciano. Mm-hmm. But I'm worrying a little bit about some backsliding from him in particular for the Auburn pitching staff, and they just don't really have the depth to deal with that. Like, they've got 5 starters or 5 pitchers they really trust, but okay, if Marciano is not going to be the Jake Marciano he was for most of the season, then now you really have 4 pitchers you trust, and that's really not enough, even in a super regional, to get through, especially with a team like Ole Miss that is as physical. So, I like for Ole Miss, I'm with you. I like the pitching staff. I like the way it shakes out. I also just like their ability to basically, they're never out of a game because of the way they swing the bats offensively. And yes, I know that comes with a ton of strikeouts, but I think that's just how they play. And I think they've succeeded with that throughout the rest of the regular season. I don't know why that wouldn't continue this weekend.
I watched a lot of Kansas, Arkansas over the weekend. Oklahoma will now head to Lawrence. How do you feel the Sooners potentially fare there?
Yeah, I think they've got a puncher's chance. This Kansas team is not overly talented, and I like this Kansas team, but this is not a Kansas team that I think is necessarily going to blow you off the field. I think they were the better team against Arkansas last weekend. I think some of what had plagued Arkansas came back to bite them again. When you talk about the lack of timely hitting, the strikeouts with guys on base, it just felt like they really, really struggled to put innings together offensively. So Kansas was the better team, but this is not necessarily some sort of juggernaut that Oklahoma can't handle. If Oklahoma is able to get good stuff on the mound, and I mean, for that matter, they didn't get much from Cam Johnson last weekend and they made it work, but if they get a better Cam Johnson, if they get the same LJ Mercurius we saw over the weekend in the regional, like, I think that really portends well for Oklahoma being able to compete this week. And I still think I like Kansas because there's just something about this Kansas team. Like, it's clearly a team that is better than the sum of its parts, and I think that can be a powerful thing at this time of year. So I still like Kansas, but Oklahoma's got a puncher's chance.
Cool environment in Lawrence over the weekend. They cleared some area behind the left field fence. It played fun there in Lawrence. And last one, Texas, who will welcome Oregon to Austin. Do you give the Ducks a shot there? Or you feel like Texas is headed to Nebraska?
I do think Texas is ultimately going to end up being the team in Omaha, but Oregon's got a shot here. They are one of those teams that one of the big deciding things in these types of matchups is, what is your high-end talent like? And it's so often when you match these SEC teams against teams from other conferences, you can kind of see it on the field where you're like, oh, the high-end talent on these two teams are not the same. And that ends up being a difference maker. But with Oregon, their high-end talent is every bit as good as Texas's in terms of raw talent. Now, they don't have the depth as much. They're obviously playing on the road. They haven't been as battle-tested as Texas. So those are the questions that I have about this Oregon team. But getting off the bus, and in terms of their prospect report, like, these guys can stand up to Texas. It's just a matter of if they're able to do so. The weak thing for Oregon is their pitching going to hold up, especially against a Longhorn team that swung the bat really, really well over the weekend. They've got a starter in Will Sanford who's having a really nice year, but once you get past that top guy, their pitching does drop off a little bit, and that's my concern from a Ducks standpoint of if they have to burn through a bunch of pitching to try to get through Game 1, I'm not sure where they turn in Games 2 and hypothetically in a Game 3.
And Joe, last one here. Two guys that are going to kind of be lumped into the same bucket because they took over for legendary coaches is Michael Early and Josh Elander. Both guys parted ways with their pitching coaches after regional play. How do you feel about those two programs right now?
I don't know that I would have said this a year ago, but I actually feel a little bit better about Texas A&M right now than I do Tennessee. It felt like Texas A&M actually had the right combination of things this year. And whereas with Tennessee, I thought that team was about what they ended up being, like a team that was more of a, even though they weren't really on the bubble, but team that felt more like a bubble team than it felt like a real contender. They had some weekends where they played pretty well, but they were never consistent. Texas A&M at times looked like they could be a national title contender, especially before they started getting hurt. So I actually have a little more confidence in Texas A&M. I also have confidence in Texas A&M going out and making, I don't know who it'll be. I can't tell you. I'm not reporting anything, but just, I have a really high level of confidence they're going to go out and spend the money necessary to hire a blockbuster pitching coach. Let's not forget Jason Kelly kind of was that. They're not going to be afraid to go out there and do that again. I'm a little less confident in that from a Tennessee standpoint, and it does feel like Tennessee's a little more adrift right now, and I think the next year is going to be an important one for the Volunteers.
Well, Joe, enjoy Athens, enjoy the baseball, and maybe we'll catch up with you in Omaha in a couple weeks.
All right, bud. Sounds like a plan. See you.
That's Joe Healy, D1 Baseball, SEC Extra Team. He and Mark Etheridge are still all over it. If you're enjoying the college baseball, even though LSU's been done for a minute, you can go check them out. They do an awesome job with Regional Breakdowns, podcast, Highway to Hoover. They're great, and Joe's been awesome all season long on Thursdays with us, so we appreciate him for jumping aboard. He's going to have a ball in Athens this weekend. That's going to be one heck of a matchup between Georgia and Mississippi State. They'll draw the lunchtime game on Saturday and Sunday. They're separated by an hour. I think it's like 12 and 1 our time, but it's the early afternoon game, both Saturday and Sunday, and then it would be a TBA on Monday if they get there. So should be an amazing weekend. I'm excited to watch some baseball this weekend and check that out. Our Thursday show's brought to you by Sagrera Farms. Premium Angus beef will come back, talk LSU football. They lose a 5-star commitment. What does it mean? That's next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Gotros Outdoor Power. GoTrosOnline.com is the website. That's GoTrosOnline.com. They got some amazing deals going on in the month of June. You're not going to want to miss it. So stop by the two locations. They got one on Airline Highway. That's obviously here in Baton Rouge. They've also got one in Gonzales. Either one, you can stop by. They've got the largest Hustler inventory in the state. And if you're looking for deals in June, $200 off the Hustler Raptor Series, $500 off the Hustler Fast Track Series, and the commercial mowers up to $1,500 off. And keep this in mind, 11 days from now, Father's Day week, the 15th through the 20th, customers can get those discounted prices and no sales tax right there in stock units on site at Gotros Outdoor Power. It's grass growing season. That means it's grass cutting season. If you need a zero-turn mower, look no further than Gotros Outdoor Power. Check them out online at GotrosOnline.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Moving along here, Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. For closing up hour number 1 here. Let's do a little recruiting. LSU loses a 5-star commitment from South Carolina edge Jaden Bryant, 6'3", 260 pounds, committed to LSU. Back in early January, once LSU made the move to bring Sterling Lucas in as a defensive line coach. Of course, Sterling Lucas comes from the Gamecocks of South Carolina. Then you got Jaden Bryant, who hails from the state of South Carolina. That relationship had been formed, and they quickly got him into the boat when Sterling Lucas took the job at LSU. And Jaden Bryant jumped on Twitter yesterday, tweeted out a "Go Tigers." All seemed well. 4 hours later, flipped to Miami and said, "I'm not taking any other visits." So it's like, okay, that's recruiting, I guess, right? And I wrote about this, and I've talked about it a little bit, but there was a time in the recruiting world where when you had a 5-star commitment and that commit decommitted or flipped, it was a meltdown. Oh my goodness, you lost a 5-star? Unbelievable. Like just heart-wrenching stuff online. Message boards, Twitter, social media, text messages, people going nuts. And yesterday, this news dropped, and I tweeted out the story that I wrote for LouisianaSports.net, and I was like, where is this on the give a darno meter here for people? And I just got responses like 0, whatever. And I think that's probably true. Now, that doesn't matter for the actual football ops building. I'm sure Sterling Lucas was bummed out yesterday. I'm sure Blake Baker was a little bummed out to hear that. I'm sure Lane Kiffin wasn't just chipper at the news that a guy they had put some time and resources into recruiting at 6'3", 260, one of the top 5 edge rushers in the country, according to these services, had flipped his commitment to Miami and had left LSU out in the cold. But in the big picture, we all kind of look at this and go, there's no question that Lane Kiffin took this job at LSU because of the access he's got to better high school talent. He's just, that is a true statement at LSU relative to Ole Miss. LSU recruits high school players at a higher level than Ole Miss. And a lot of that is because of LSU's national brand, and certainly even more of it is because of the weight that carries in the state. Now, if LSU does not close Easton Royal, if LSU does not get Elijah Haven, which they're not, and if LSU can't go down the road to Cecilia and grab another 5-star on the offensive line, well, then all of a sudden you are going to have some people freaking out, because that's the stuff that really still moves the needle. You need to close Albert Simeon. You've got Ahmad Hudson. Albert Simeon, you're fighting A&M for. Easton Royal, you're fighting Texas for. You're dealing with the Lone Star State on 2 different fronts there. You get those 3 guys, you're good. That's the point. Now, you don't get any of those guys, just Ahmad Hudson, you lose out on Easton Royal, you lose out on Elijah Haven, you lose out on Albert Simeon. Miguel Whitley committed to Ole Miss this week. Like, all of a sudden, you look at that and you go, okay, you need to tighten that up. But you know that the transfer portal is available to go stock the shelves. You know that losing a high school player is not as impactful as it once was. I still contend you need Will Campbell in this program. You need Whit Weeks in this program. You need Tradez Green in this program. You need the 4 and 5-star, 3 and 4 year high school players that you bring in. You don't want to go get 40 new transfers every single year to restock the entire starting lineup. That's not the best way to go about it. It's a way you have to consider, but picking up these high-end Louisiana high schoolers, paying them a reasonable amount to develop them through the program and having them for multiple years, as opposed to players in the vein of A.J. Halsey who come in here, they're here for 5 months, they're gone. Like, that helps, but 3 years is more impactful than 5 months. So I still think that high school recruiting is very important. I still think Lane Kiffin took this job because of the advantages you have in some high school recruiting. But in this instance, an out-of-state kid, even at a 5-star, that used to be just sound the alarms. And a guy like Bryce Underwood's still going to do that. You got the number 1 quarterback in the nation committed, could be a program-changing player. That's still going to sound some alarms. But an edge rusher, a cornerback, a tailback, a linebacker, it just doesn't move the needle like it once did. And I think that has to do a lot with the fact that the transfer portal is right there. But I will say, if there are Louisiana kids that you can't nail down, that's when you start to feel the squeeze a little bit. So yesterday's news just didn't really move the needle a lot. We'll see how LSU closes with the top guys in the state of Louisiana, Easton Royal, Albert Simeon, and then, guys that you have down the line that you would like to get in this class, like potentially Karan Eugene, you got Jaden Anding, those types. We'll see. That's a look at LSU football recruiting here on this Thursday, brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. Father's Day's coming up. You want some of the finest beef in the country? It's just north of Baton Rouge. Prime steaks, prime ground beef, prime everything that Sean does up there at Sagrera Farms. So go by and see him and contact Sean. I'll give you his number every single week, and we'll do so coming up here in hour number 2. But they bring you our Thursday shows each and every week. If you missed any of the first hour, catch it on demand. Search Hunt Palmer Show. Open the show talking about LSU basketball. Scheduling Gonzaga and Houston. Incredible. Luke Johnson talking Saints. You can find that at Hunt on Saints. Joe Healy previewing the Supers. We'll pause for Sports Center. When we come back, some sound from Saints OTAs. That is next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Fabry Chevrolet GMC online at FabryChevrolet.com. That is FabryChevrolet.com. Got some awesome deals going on in the month of June at Fabry Chevrolet GMC. You want a 2026 Chevy Silverado? 0% APR financing now until the end of the month. That's for 36 months. Want a 2026 GMC Sierra 1500? You can get that for 2.9 APR financing for 72 months. So now until the end of the month, which you've got a few weeks. Really look at that Chevy Trailblazer, maybe the Chevy Trax. You can get those for as low as $30,000. They've got incredible options there at Fabry Chevrolet GMC. They've got new vehicles. They've got pre-owned vehicles, and the entire inventory is online at FabryChevrolet.com. So always invite you to make that short drive up to St. Francisville. They're right there on Highway 61, and happy to see you in person. But you can start your buying experience online at FabryChevrolet.com. The entire inventory is right there. It's online at FabryChevrolet.com.